site-specific contract. Aaron, why don't you tell us what FDOT does, and then we'll move on to another panelist.
Okay, so when we talk about site-specific contracts, I guess I would say we're referring to the more traditional type of contract, the type that's where you develop the scope, the plans, the details, and then put it out to bid. So it's competitively procured based on price through a low bid process. So you've got the ability to develop this, the project, the contract package based on the needs of the project. You can do specialized repairs. You can do major repairs or reconstruction. Rehabilitation. Sometimes we have like a group of structures we're rehabilitating at the same time within one project. We've used it for emergency repairs, as well as for upgrade, retrofit, and renewal and replacement work, the recurring work that's necessary over time. I think that's the major advantage with this type of contracting method is you do have maximum flexibility to develop the project and the contract to suit your needs for whatever type of work you're trying to accomplish. The major disadvantage that we see in this type of contracting method, and I think it was Jeff that mentioned it earlier, is that lead time. If you do have to go through a project development phase, it's probably not something that's going to happen quickly for you. More often than not, you got to develop those plans and specifications and technical details. And if you don't have the engineering resources in house, you may even need to go through a professional services procurement just to get the engineer on board to develop those plans and specifications, and before you even get to construction. And if the work is complex or costly, there may be it varies from agency to agency, but there may be a process where you have to go through the request project and the resources to do that project, which can be time consuming as well. So long story short, the process is time consuming, the administrative aspects and letting it out to bid, but the advantage is flexibility to be able to do what you need to do. So I guess I wasn't going to go into too much more detail than that, and to rather open it up to the panel to share their thoughts.
Bill Oliver, what are your thoughts on this contracting type?
We have similar, this what Aaron had described was pretty much, our typical improvement contract, which is subject to NEPA and Wisconsin environmental protection laws. Projects that go into our improvement and LET program are also subject to be in our transportation improvement plan. We do the environmental coordination, agency coordination, if there's real estate associated with it, utility, and in many instances, public involvement. We would use state or federal dollars for that type of contract. It is also, competitive bidding, LET process. Prevailing wage issues have to be incorporated into that as well. Along that side, though, with those contracts, as kind of a side note, depending on the nature of the work, if it's in close vicinity to a pre-existing improvement project, even if we're in the construction phase, we potentially can contract modify an existing construction project to be inclusive of work on a nearby need. I mean, that's probably more of a urgent response situation of a similar quantity, if they're out there doing deck patching or something like that, and there's another bridge with an emerging need, we may be able to modify the existing contract on a project already underway to include additional quantity and perhaps some additional mobilization to address that other need. But it's discouraged from a project management standpoint to just modify our existing construction contracts. We recognize it as a possibility and tool, and I've done it many times. But overall, if we've got the time, we'll try to move that into our improvement program and let it as an individual need as appropriate.
Becky, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say maybe one of the unique things that Utah does with this type of contracting is almost all of our contracts of this nature go out, not just low bid, but a price plus time component to it. So the contractor is bidding for the individual bid items, but also the number of days that it will take to complete the project. And each of those days is given a weighted dollar value. So maybe they don't have the overall low bid amount for the contract, but they can get it done quicker. And that's a way for us to put that value towards kind of that get in, get out, stay out mentality of speeding up the actual construction. and getting the contract completed quicker. It's just one of our unique aspects to it.
Awesome. What do you think?
This seems almost exactly the kind of thing that we do over at NJDOT for our site-specific ones. These are usually handled by a group called Capital Program Management, and they program out the bridges they're going to fix through forecasting needs through the ratings that come through structural evaluation. That probably all sounds very familiar, but they can also be triggered by an aggregation of maintenance issues that just build up over time that trigger some kind of either bridge deck replacement or widening or something like that. I'm trying to see if there were any other differences here, and ours are bid as a fixed quantity of specific items based off of the design, which is either done in-house or with a professional services contract. That's pretty much all for us in terms of differences.
Mr. Jeff Milton, what about you?
In Virginia, we do similar to what others have described. These site contracts are for the larger types of work, construction of a complete new bridge or complete widening of an existing bridge, on very major rehabilitation. So yes, we use these a fair amount, and the advantages are that you tailor the contract to the specific site and the type of work that you need to do. The disadvantages, like I mentioned previously, are that the lead time and project advertisement time is very extensive. So that's why we choose to use the push button contract for a lot of our routine and maintenance and preservation work. So each contract has its place depending on the circumstances.
Very well stated. Mr. Hooks, you want to address a few questions at this time?
For a municipality who's never had a bridge maintenance contract, would you recommend developing a low bid pay item contract or a qualifications-based cost plus fixed fee, or a hybrid of the two?
I would say that the general, like district or region-wide contract has a lot of flexibility and has a lot to be said for it. And for small types of work that don't involve a lot of engineering and that kind of thing, I think those contracts work very well and would probably serve a municipality very well.
Can I add to that? In Wisconsin, we see a lot of success with our small municipalities and larger municipalities doing local lets for work of this nature and even significant bridge replacement, which is still competitive. I think that's a worthwhile concept for them to pursue that. If they just follow the models that their, DOTs within their, that they're within use, it seems to work out well for our locals.
Okay, another question is, do any of these state contracts allow federal participation for funding?
Yes, in Virginia they do, and we have certain requirements that the contract has to meet to be federally funded, but we make maximum use of federal funds to the extent possible. So yes, these type contracts are federally funded in many cases.
In Wisconsin, we use both state and federal funds as well. We'll use state funds if we've got real estate issues and that real estate acquisition timeline compromises the overall goals of the project, because there are some federal requirements for that timeline.
Becky, here's a question. Could you talk a little bit more about weighing the value of working days in price and time?
Yeah, so depending on what the route is and what the ADT is and what we feel the impact will be, there's a certain dollar amount that's assigned to each day. So the engineer doing the estimating will also put an estimated number of days that it should take to complete the project. So there'll be an engineer's estimate for the number of days, and then also a minimum number of days, a maximum number of days. All of the bid items are added up, and then whatever that dollar amount factor multiplies the number of days that the contractor bids, and that time component is then added to their bid value. So there's a dollar amount assigned to that day value, and those two are added together, and then it's the low bid out of those two. And the weighting varies depending on what the criticality is of having that route open. So if it's a minor route that has pretty low impacts, then there's just a nominal amount that's assigned to each construction day. And then the more the traffic and the more the demand increases for that route, that dollar amount that weights onto the day increases. So there's a heavier portion of the project that's determined by the number of days that are bid versus the lower volume roads where they have a lower impact from the number of days bid, and more of the selection is based on just the individual bid items in the contract.
Another quick one, I think, Becky, maybe you don't know the answer to this one, but is how often in Utah does the non-low bidder end up with the contract? Is that something you keep track of?
I know that there are people that keep track of it, but that's not one that I'm directly involved with, so I'm not sure the exact amount. I think it does happen fairly regularly, though, that the time component does choose the award of the project.
All right, Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.